Start. Where are we going? Ah, there it is. Okay. Okay. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. My name is Kyle Ryan Hutchison, and today during this presentation, I will be going over and reviewing the data collected by the Blue Team back in 2013. All right, let us begin. Well, wow, look at that transition. First off, we have a graph that covers the months, and not only the months, but the number of write-ups and recordables occurred during those months. On the terms of the trends that you can see in this graph, we can interpret this graph. It would seem during the beginning of the year, the workers are tamer and tend to watch themselves to make sure they're safe. However, as the year goes on, all the months tend to level out, except for December. We can likely expect a raise during the holiday months due to in-laws, traveling, and having a frustrating home life, leading to the peak of the graph, which is obviously December. Which, look at that, it's 60 to 30. It's literally double the amount of write-ups and incidents that occurred throughout the year. On the other hand, the slow spot on this graph, or you could say the valley of the graph, occurs specifically at February. I'll go ahead and throw March in there too, since they're both just at 10 and less, which is actually a remarkable amount of write-ups to have during 1 month. All right, moving on. Another beautiful transition there. All right, now we have the day of the week. And this is a clear and easily noticeable trend represented via the data given from this chart. While at the start of the week on Monday, we see a spike in data slowly trailing off as we get closer to Thursday, picking right back up just before the weekend on Friday. As you can see being represented by the graph, that the peaks occurred during the first 3 days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. While in most cases, it really isn't that strange to see this in most situations, because Monday, it's the beginning of your typical normal work week, and people aren't getting back in the jive. They're not back in the groove of the work, and they just don't have their head in the right spot. So sometimes we see more write-ups occurring on the earlier days of the week, and as you can see, it trails off slightly towards Thursday. As the week goes on, it trails off and loses a few write-ups per day as people get back into the grind of the workday. And if it's not obvious, by the tiny bar corresponding with the day of Thursday, this day, which experienced a drop in number of write-ups, this day is the valley in our graph. Really, I don't really have a specific reason why on Thursday specifically we see a drastic drop in the number of write-ups and recordables occurring. It could simply be because maybe that's when all the workers are in their prime time and putting out maximum performance. But that truly involves a further detailed investigation. One thing that this graph presents through the data is that there is a lot of opportunity to lower the amount of write-ups occurring on Mondays. That's for sure. Hey, clearly Garfield isn't the only person who hates Mondays. This chart represents the average amount of incidents which occurred during each day of the week. Thank you for your time. Let's move on. Oh, see ya. See you later. All right. Well, the previous chart was representing which days of the week write-ups occurred. This chart right here shows us what time of day those incidents occurred, furthering the detail in the data. The data which is being presented in this graph shows us that the majority of write-ups would tend to occur between the hours of between lunch hours and the typical closing hours of your workday. With the counterpart of the valley in the data would be at 12 p.m., which is at lunchtime. And in most cases, you don't typically see people getting hurt during lunch. I mean, unless they're sitting there choking on their food, then that's probably about the only write up you'll see around 12 o'clock, your typical lunchtime break hours. All right. It would seem the employees tend to get lax with their safety management after they've eaten their lunch and are getting prepared and you're just ready to go home for the day. That's why we see such a large spike between the hours of 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. because people they're thinking about what they're going to do when they get home. Their head's not in the right space. They're not in the mindset of focusing on their work at hand. That's why we see more write-ups during those hours. All right, our next slide. Oh, not simple transaction. All right. Well. This graph right here is arguably the most important graph we'll be looking at all day. Well, this graph it tells us the ever so delightful information on whether or not the write-ups that been recorded within the blue team's book, if those happen due to the negligence of anyone within the blue team. And this is clearly my favorite graph. There's so much detail here. Well, moving on to the peaks and valleys of this graph. If you take a look at this graph, the peak is the no section of the pie chart, coming out at a whopping 83%, followed by yes being the valley of the chart. Yes stands at 17% of the write-ups came from members of the blue group. Wow, that's so much data to take off right there. Well, this this actually probably is the most important graph that we'll be looking at. This should be the high-ret chart. Well, in my case, it's the closest I could get to creating the proper high-ret chart. As you can tell, my color schemes got off, and I just it got away from me. I couldn't figure it out. All right. But anyways, as the graph will tell you, the area or what type of incident that occurred, along with the numbers of that accident and the severity of each write-up. As the chart shows, the leading number of incidents occurred in the mobile equipment area. This is in the mobile equipment area. This tends to prove highest across the entire industry. It just seems that humans have a problem when it comes to being in control of equipment. The second highest amount of write-ups comes from the area of PPE. This clearly is only because workers can be stubborn when it comes to doing new things. Which, whenever it comes to PPE, that mainly makes me think it's the older employees who have been doing their job that way for 30 some odd years, and that's the way they've done it every single day, so they're not going to change it. Which that's, I mean, that's, no, that's not okay. You got to do the job right. But I respect them for doing that job for so long. But still, it's time to make a change and get safe. Okay. Following PPE will be the tool use coming in third place. This would seem to prove high on the list due to workers not taking the time and all the proper precautions and to do the job the right way. Both of the final two are too close to decide whether one outranks the other or not, and both of which are falls and walking surfaces, which when you think about that, they're almost the same thing because if you have something wrong with your walking surface and an incident occurs, more than likely that's gonna that's gonna make a fall write up. It's, yeah, a write up's gonna occur within the fall area. And really, all it takes to draw these numbers back and get and have less write ups in these specific groups is really just you got to get your workers out there and give them the proper training that they need for the specific jobs that they may be doing and just better knowledge of tool of equipment. That's all it really takes. While the peaks of this chart are easily definable, there happen to be many valleys shown in this data, which goes all the way across the board from anywhere from burns all the way to guarding. And really, and it seems like we're pretty safe in those territories. It's just like there's just one slip up of someone who probably didn't know exactly what to do. All right, let's move on to our next slide. Well, is this is the 5 whys for one of my recordables. And this is about how John Smith burned his arm. Well, John Smith, he's a welder, you see, and he was welding on a pipe support when he turned and touched his left arm to a fresh weld, scorching hot, and it resulted on a burn on John's left arm. And it was a pretty significant burn, seeing that it was a fresh weld. Okay, well, we're just going to go at it. Our first why. Why was John Smith welding in the first place? Well, the recordables don't give you that much data of the actual situation. These are my own opinions or what I think probably took place during that specific situation. Why was John welding in the first place? Well, in my opinion, it was probably his job and he had to fix it. The support was probably getting weak, so John needed to perform maintenance work on the support. If he didn't, his boss was probably going to fire his ass. Secondly, why did John burn his arm? I would assume he finished his weld and he was turning to grab a new fresh welding rod. And at that time, that's when he bumped his arm on the weld. Next up, why was John not wearing the proper PPE to protect his arm from burns? Well, when I thought about this, I thought more than likely John got hot while he was working, as welders typically do. Why did John get hot while he's working? Well, if I had to guess, it would be because he had been welding too long and got too hot from welding. Plus, the weather could have, who knows what the weather was like that day. Lastly, why did John get overheated from welding? I would have to say that John did not take any breaks while he was welding, resulting in this situation. And that's important to take breaks, especially when you're welding, because if you're constantly up there, you're going to get hot and you're going to want to take something off to reduce the heat stress, which is a horrible idea, especially when it comes to welding. You can get burned so easily. All right, next up, we have my near misses versus my recordables. Well, as you can see, I had quite a few near misses, all the way up to 315, which is blatantly towering over the number of recordables standing at 3. All right, next up. Here are my top 5 near misses. At number 1, it was a mobile equipment, and this was ranked at 16. This near miss occurred from an operator who was operating a forklift. While he was operating the forklift, the employee lost control, but luckily he quickly regained control, and upon further investigation, it turns out the employee actually had very little sleep the past few nights. Which if you're going to be working, that's important. You have to get your sleep every night, especially if you're a forklift operator. The direct cost from this write up, if it actually occurred to be a recordable, could have been around $90,000. The indirect costs would come out to be around $109,000, coming up to the total cost, which would be $199,614 if this particular write up occurred and actually caused a recordable. Next up, in second place, we have a fall, and this was also ranked at 16. Well, let me describe it to you. While a person was cleaning the breeze off the roof, an employee was not wearing a safety harness while he was operating close to the edge. Seeing that this employee was cleaning the gutters, this tends to leave one at an unusual position, and like you're getting down there cleaning your gutters out, your head's closer to the edge of the roof than you would want it to be. And if said person would have fallen off the roof, they could have easily landed on their neck and died instantly. Which the direct cost, if this write up occurred, would have been around $78,000. Following the indirect cost of that write up could have been somewhere in the ballpark of $85,900, resulting in the total cost of $164,096. Third place, we have another mobile equipment. That's pretty typical. Humans don't like using their mobile equipment. This, however, only scored 12. Another mobile equipment while parking a truck. Mr. Carl was parking his truck and forgot to take it out of gear when he hopped out. It started rolling backwards, but luckily he jumped back in and stopped it. This was a bad situation because it doesn't tell us where he was parking his truck, what the surrounding area was like, how many people was around him. But if he didn't notice that his truck was still in gear and it started going, there's really nothing that could have stopped it until it hit a larger piece of equipment or a building that actually brought it to a complete stop. There's no telling how many people it could have struck down. This could have easily resulted in much higher cost than what I'm going to be presenting to you than what it was. I would say the direct cost from this should have been around $60,000, with the indirect being $82,000, leading to the total cost being $143,096. Next, in fourth place for our near misses, we have an exposure. This was ranked at 12. Well, this person was getting ready to go mudding, and they're cranking up the four-wheelers. And I guess they had the large group because they're cranking up a couple four-wheelers. But the shed that had the four-wheelers, they had 2 roll-up doors, and this person had only rolled up one door halfway. This person starts to start 5 of the four-wheelers without opening the doors fully. and after a few minutes, they start feeling dizzy from the fumes. This would lead to a direct cost of $54,564, an indirect cost of $60,000. Oh, I forgot it's another zero. Oh gosh. And the total cost would come out to be around $115,000. Moving on to our fifth and final of the near misses. It's another fall, and this is also ranked at 12. This one's actually kind of a funny story. I don't know who Daniel is, but he seems like a nice fella. I might want to get to know him. Daniel had a little bit too much to drink that night. And you see, Daniel has a lifted truck, and he went to jump up in it. But when Daniel did not jump high enough, so he hit the side of the truck and fell on the ground, but he barely caught himself. Seeing how Daniel was intoxicated, this automatically raises the severity of the near miss. Due to the fact that Daniel was so drunk, he could have knocked himself out, and he could have ended up face down in a puddle of water and drowned. Which leads me to the calculations of the direct costs of this write-up being $52,000, following the indirect cost being $69,000, leading to the grand total cost of $120,000. Next up, we have my worst recordable out of my three. And my top recordable occurred while a worker was fixing a roller on the conveyor belt, when unknowingly to the employee, the conveyor belt was activated and caused the worker a severe laceration to the finger. However, this could have been much worse if they had an amputation to one finger or more. Luckily, he only had a laceration, even though it was severe. And here I gave us two different indirect and direct costs for the situation. I gave us the actual cost of what the recordable actually happened, and then I gave us if he actually amputated a finger, just to play with some numbers and let you know what's going on here. While during the actual situation with the laceration, the direct cost would have been $55,382. The indirect cost of a laceration comes around to be $64,985, leading to the total cost of laceration to one finger coming out to be $120,367. That's pretty good, but he got lucky that he didn't actually amputate his finger, because that would have cost a significant amount more. The direct cost of one amputated finger averages out to be $96,000, while the direct cost of an amputated finger could be $105,000, leading to the grand total cost of one amputated finger coming out to be $200,000, that's only one finger. Doesn't matter what finger it is. Moving on. Finally, this brings us to my ORI for this company. Well, at the beginning of the year, the ORI starts out tremendously high at a 6, which is, you don't want to be anywhere near a 6 on your ORI. But luckily, as the year goes on, the ORI slowly and peacefully trails down to what this graph represents as a 1, but in my calculations, it was actually a 1.5, which honestly isn't too bad of a number, seeing that 1 is more than likely, it might be as low as you're ever going to see. Okay, so question is, would I buy or work for this company? Well, that's kind of a relevant question. I mean, based solely on the ORI rate alone of 1.5, I would definitely buy or consider buying this company, because, well, they really prove to keep themselves in check and out of trouble. But if I was offered a job at this company, I mean, I probably would not turn it down either, seeing that the ORI rate is so low that I probably wouldn't have to do much as a safety coordinator to ensure that my employees are kept safe, seeing that they more than likely already do what they can to keep themselves safe. Next up, I have the wellness programs for this company. Well, for the wellness program, we will be focusing on the issue of smoking. Seeing the rise of big tobacco pushing new vapes and targeting children, it's more important than ever to teach parents about the harms of smoking. That way, maybe they can go home and teach their own kids. But not to mention that smoking is not as popular as it used to be back in my grandparents' day. It would seem that's the cool thing to do. If you weren't smoking, then you weren't a cool cat. So, seeing how that is, it might actually be easier to get our workers to abide by our wellness program. The goals of our program are to ultimately stop the smoking with all employees. However, we know that goal might be impossible, which leads us to try and make sure workers do not smoke on the site or while they're on their break. Our program aims to stop is a stop smoking program where we take the smokes out of the worker's mouth and put them out. And it just works. Employees stop smoking if you take the cigarette out of their mouth. You might get punched in the face, but hey, they stop smoking that particular cigarette. And well, we get the message out via meetings, and we tell them that they will get a bonus to their pay if they prove to us that they actually stop smoking. And sure, you might ask, well, a bonus to their pay, that's gonna cost the company so much. Well, that might be true, but think about it this way. That little bonus to each worker's pay is nothing compared to the amount of one worker buying cigarettes a year. If one worker buys cigarettes a year, that could easily cover the cost of, or double or triple the cost of how much it would take to give a bonus to employees if they stop smoking. Well, thank you for your time and patience. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Have a good day.